So the last type of transport that we need to talk about is osmosis. We've talked about diffusion, which is the movement of small uncharged particles directly through the phospholipids. Then we've talked about facilitated diffusion, which is the movement of charged particles or hydrophilic particles through the membrane from high to low using proteins. And then last but not least, we have to talk about osmosis. And osmosis is the diffusion of water. And we're going to spend a couple days on osmosis. I'm going to do a lab with osmosis. But osmosis is one of the more complicated things, and it's a little bit more complicated than we actually learned in 9th grade. So like I said, osmosis is the movement of water, specifically water, from an area of high concentration, so water, from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Essentially, you could say it's the diffusion of water. If we look at the situation that we have here, this molarity tells you how much stuff is inside this compartment. And here we're going to say that this is a membrane here that's separating the two sides, a semi-permeable membrane. So the molarity tells you how much stuff is in the on each side of the membrane or each cell. And if you have more stuff, so here there's more stuff here, this molarity is higher, that means you have less water. If you have less stuff, that means you have more water. So this side has less water. I'm going to put an L for less. And this side here has more water. If you remember what that means, water has to travel from where there is high water, so we'll put high instead of M, so more. And here has less water or low water. Water always has to travel from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So that means the water is going to move in this direction. So one of the problems here, though, is that water is a polar molecule. So because it's a polar molecule, it can't go through the phospholipids, and it gets repelled by the fatty acid tails, so it hates fatty acid tails. Some of it can actually leak through a tiny bit because it's a small molecule, but not in any great amount. So in the membrane, there are these protein channels called aquaporins. And their job is to allow water to move through the membrane more quickly. But it still has to move from an area of high concentration where there's a lot of water to where there's low water. But the water moves specifically through aquaporins, which provide a hydrophilic channel. That's kind of important. They provide a hydrophilic channel for the water to go through. We're now going to look at the different types of solutions, and we learned about these in 9th grade. The words are a little bit confusing. I'm going to try to explain them the best I can, but every year this seems to cause some sort of confusion. So we'll see how it goes. So the first type of solution that we have is a solution that is hypotonic. The word hypo means less, and tonic means stuff. So a solution that is hypotonic has less stuff dissolved in it than the cell. So if we look at this situation here, there's less stuff here than inside the cell because the molarity is lower. So this solution here is hypotonic. Okay. Now, if there's less stuff, what that means is that there's more water out here. So when a cell is placed in a hypotonic solution, water moves into the cell. In animal cells, this causes the cell to either swell, or if it's really, really hypotonic, it causes it to explode. Plant cells have a cell wall, and they do not explode. They actually get it's called turgid. They get turgid. That's actually good for plants. We'll summarize what's good for plants and animals on the last slide of this. So our next type of solution is known as a hypertonic solution. So hypertonic solution, which is our next term. So hypertonic solutions are the reverse. They're solutions that have more stuff dissolved in it, or they have a higher concentration on the outside. So if we take a look here, there's a higher concentration of stuff than inside the cell. So in this case, what that means is that there is more water, less stuff, but more water inside the cell. As a result, since there's more water inside the cell, water moves out of the cell. This causes animal cells to shrivel or shrink. This is really, really bad for plant cells. It causes them to do something called plasmolysis. And a lot of times, or the vacuole collapses on itself. The large central vacuole collapses on itself. And usually causes cell death in this case. We have our last type of solution. Our last type of solution, I apologize, something happened, I needed to pause. So our last type of solution is an isotonic solution. The word iso means same. So in an isotonic solution, the concentrations of stuff inside the cell and outside the cell are the same. As a result, the water inside and outside is the same. So what will happen here is essentially the cell is at equilibrium. Water will both move into the cell and also out of the cell at equal rates. This is good for animal cells. Animal cells like this environment. It's their perfect environment for them. Saline solutions are usually made to be isotonic to some extent. But plant cells, this is not good enough for plant cells. Plants get what they call flaccid in this environment. They need to be in hypotonic solutions. Here is the summary for sort of what happens to the different cells in different environments. We'll go through each solution and see what happens. In a hypotonic solution, that's when there's less stuff on the outside, so water moves more water moves into the cell because there's less stuff, so that means more water on the outside. So less stuff, more water. Water moves in. This will cause animal cells to burst sometimes or swell. And this is what plant cells like. It causes their vacuole to fill with water, and they become turgor, which is what's known as turgor pressure, which we're going to discuss on Monday. Then we have isotonic solutions, and that's when the amount of water, or the amount of stuff, is the same on each side. That causes equal diffusion of water into and out of the cell. As a result, this is good for animal cells. Animal cells like this environment. Plant cells are not getting enough water in this environment. Their vacuoles aren't filled with water, so they become flaccid. And then last but not least, we have a hypertonic solution. In a hypertonic solution, there is more stuff on the outside of the cell, so that means there's more water in, and the water diffuses out of the cell. It's almost like you think about water being sucked out of the cell to some extent, in very, very salty solutions that have a lot of stuff on the outside. This causes animal cells to shrivel. It's also sort of why when you wash your hand, or when you're washing dishes with dish soap, your hands get all pruny. The soap is there's lots of stuff in that water that you're using, the soap solution, and it pulls water out of your cells. It's also why you shouldn't drink salt water if you're stranded on an island. It'll just pull water out of your cells as opposed to quenching your thirst. In plant cells, this also pulls water out of the cells when it's in a hypertonic solution, but this is so bad for plant cells. It causes the plant cell vacuole, the big central vacuole, to collapse on itself. And that is called plasmolysis, or that the cell is plasmolyzed, and that usually causes plant cell death at that point. There are two questions that follow. I'm going to ask you to answer them and try to do. They're both. I think they're both multiple choice. Yes, they are. But before we answer, I'm going to go back to the beginning slide of this PowerPoint just to talk about the hypotonic stuff. So if you look at here, this original situation that we had, we have a solution on this side that has 0.4 m and a solution that has 0.5 m. This solution here, since it has more stuff, is said to be hypertonic because it has more stuff. This one's hypertonic to this side over here. This one is hypotonic to the other side. So in this case, there's not a cell. There's two compartments. But since this one has more stuff, it's hypertonic to this one. Okay? Now, that arrow's the wrong way. Now, if you think about this, this side has less stuff, hypotonic, but it has more water, and that's why we said water is going to move that way. That type of thinking is confusing, because you think about hypo means less, but it means less stuff, therefore more water. That type of thinking is sometimes confusing. So what I would like you to do again is answer these two questions, and then do the guided questions, and we will discuss this on Monday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.